Today is February 12th, and tomorrow is Friday the 13th. Yeah, which I know well because in addition to my romances, I write mysteries, including a superstition mystery series. But most important is Saturday, Valentine's Day, the day of romance, and that's why we are here. So I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves and say what they write first of all, and then after that we'll get into why you've chosen that. And by the way, I have just some little trinkets to give away. I have some tickets here, so at some point, maybe toward the end, I'll just pass out tickets and we'll see who wins. But anyway, why don't we start here and introduce yourself and say what you write.
Okay, I'm Lorenz Font, and I write paranormal, contemporary, and one erotic romance. One. I started writing 4 years ago, and to date I have 6 published plays. Woo!
I'm Tracy LaMonica, and I write under the pen name Nicola Italia, and I have 3 published books, and I write historical romance, and I am actually celebrating my first year as a published author. I published my first book in February 9th, 2014, so.
Woo! That's great. Why don't you go ahead now?
I'm Celia Bonaduce.
Yay!
And I actually have always considered myself a romantic comedy writer rather than, because I was raised in a Catholic school and romance scenes just do not flow. So we're heavy on the comedy in my books. I have this series, which is the Venice Beach Romance series, and I have a new series coming out between May and July. I'm with Kensington Books, and they haven't decided which, and that is called Welcome to Fat Chance, Texas. So it's a very different locale.
And so I'm Veronica Scott. Actually, my real name is Jean Walker, but Veronica Scott is the author. And so I write science fiction romance, and I write paranormal romances set in ancient Egypt. And my first 2 books were published by Carina, which is a branch of Harlequin, and then since then I've been independently publishing them all. I have 7 books out, and the 8th one is waiting for me at home.
Okay, now I am Linda O. Johnston, and I have been doing this longer than analyst. I write both romance and mystery. This book, this is actually the advanced reader's copy, but the actual book will be out in May, and it will be my 39th published novel. I'm currently writing for Midnight Ink 2 different mystery series, including superstition mysteries, but I'm also writing for Harlequin. I've been writing romances. My first published novels were romances, time travel romances, and I've been writing for Harlequin in different series for quite a few years now. The ones that I have here are nocturnes, which are the paranormal romances, and you can tell from my mysteries that I'm a dog nut, while my paranormal romances have shapeshifters in them who happen to be wolves primarily. So, and I also like the Harlequin series. So now we're going to get into this a little bit heavier stuff. Why did you start writing romance?
It sells.
That's true.
Everyone seems to enjoy a good romance, whether or not they claim that they believe in it or anything else. They will read romance if it's there. Just like, everyone has seen Titanic, right? I mean, it's all about the sinking ship. But without Rose and Jack, it's not going to be the same. So that's just how I look at it. It's always going to be, there's always going to be a good romance. It's going to be a good story.
Got anything to add?
Yeah, I think I had several jobs over the years, and I just really always working for other people, and not really happy, not really satisfied, and I always loved writing, and so it's what I read, and so that's what I did, was write historical romance, and I'm kind of master of my own destiny now. It gives me a lot of control, and I really enjoy it, and my fans seem to like it, so win-win.
I'm not yet master of my own destiny.
Let's not say master, maybe starting.
I'm still floundering. I agree that it ends up being about the romance. But as I said, I didn't set out to write a romance. I thought I was writing, all 3 books to my mind are the journeys of whoever the protagonist is in each book. They're all related. Book 1 is about one sister, book 2 is about another sister, book 3 is about both sisters and their mother. That's my mother over there. And I was very surprised when I got a call from Kensington, which is, you know, a romance house. Because to me, it was all about the journey of these women. But of course, within the journey of the women, you know, a massive amount of the book is about, you know, who's the guy. So on that level, I guess no matter what you're writing, you know, you got that romance in there, that's the thing.
Well, so I think I was born with the romance gene because at age 7 I wrote my first book, and it had flying cats and flying horses and princesses, and the hero was a riverboat captain. And I had no idea why. I don't know what 7-year-old me was thinking, but clearly romance was important. And so my father loved science fiction, so we had shelves and shelves of that. And my mother loved ancient history, so we had shelves and shelves of that. And you know, I read it all, but it just seemed, all of it seemed to me like it needed more romance. I have to have romance for it to be complete for me. So that's why. It's just that gene, it's in there.
I guess for me, when I started reading as a kid, I enjoyed things that were romantic suspense, and that's kind of where, when I started writing seriously, that's kind of where my mind was going. I like the idea of having relationships, and what I found is that no matter what I'm writing, it has some degree of romance and some degree of mystery or suspense, because those are the things that I like to read and have always liked to read, so now I stick them in too. I did have one of my early books, a fairy tale that was published by Dorchester, and I put some suspense in it, or you know, more suspense than just the romance, because all romances are suspense. And that particular publisher decided no, they didn't want the mystery type suspense in it. So there is one book out of all of them that those elements are not there. But obviously, if I'm writing a romance story, the romance is going to be paramount, with the mystery part of it or the suspense part of it in the back, more in the background, or not as important. And vice versa with my mystery series, my characters, my protagonists, they've all been in first person, and my protagonists always have a romantic interest, but they don't necessarily go very far in the story. Okay, well, why don't we start on something else? I guess the next question that I had was why we think romance is such a popular genre. We kind of touched on that, but does anybody have anything else they'd like to say about it?
Again.
And I think for mine, which is historical, I think people who like to read historical romance enjoy the different settings, the different, you know, if you're going into 18th century France, or if you're, you know, like my second book was Ceylon in Victorian era. People like to put themselves in those different places, and the historical aspect with the romance, and a hot guy doesn't hurt, right? So.
Yeah, this is an interesting time also for this panel, because on the way here and other times as well, of course, the movie 50 Shades of Grey is coming out tomorrow, which is, I'm sure, supposed to be because it's in Valentine's Day too. But obviously, that's getting a lot of buzz, and in its way, it's a romance. So that's hopefully going to help all of us sell our romances too. You never know. Anybody else have any input? Okay. All right, well, in fact, let's get into that. How sexy are your stories, and why?
It's quite sexy. I won't go deeper into the erotic ones since we're just discussing paranormal right now. it is, it has its moments. They're vampires, so sky is the limit. I do not, I obviously worry about morality, human standards, so I can do whatever I want. There are certain taboo subjects that I've touched that I won't discuss, but it's there. Just, yes, I am Catholic too. You and the other person. Obviously, but my mom actually read the book, and she's okay with it. So I have an approval. So it does get pretty hot.
Yeah, I have, what I found interesting is I have my 3 novels, and the first one is very sexual, and my 91-year-old grandmother could not read it. But it's the #1 selling one, and my other 2, which are much more tamer, kind of Lisa Kleypas, Connie Mason, if anybody is familiar with historical romances, and they do well, but not as well. So, you know, people like to, you know, kind of poo-poo the sex, but from my experience, that's the one that's the most selling. And why your question was kind of how sexy, I would call my first one maybe spicy. and the second 2 are very tame. So. How about you?
Not sexy. Not sexy on any level. I did use the word nipple in my first book, and I couldn't write for 2 days. They're funny. They're funny, and you know, and I think very real. You know, because everything's such a train wreck.
Well, I mean, I think that kind of makes the point that you have to have as much sex and romance in the book as the story calls for. Some stories, the sex, you would have to shoehorn it in there. That doesn't sound right. But some stories you want the sexual content. That just isn't the way it goes. Like my first book is based, my first science fiction book is based on the Titanic, only it's set in the future on a space liner. Well, they don't have time, and I tried to find them nooks and crannies of the ship. But there just wasn't time because the ship was going to blow up in a certain amount of time. So that one doesn't have actual sex between them, but the others do. I usually say I'm like about 3 flames on the heat meter. You know, there is sex, and I describe it, and it's spicy, but it's not intimate erotic. Yeah. So, yeah, with mine.
Mine, I write, mysteries that I write are cozy, so if the characters do anything, it's not on the page. With the romances, what I found was interesting is, as I said, I've been writing for Harlequin for quite a while, and 3 series. I was writing for Intrigue, which was their romantic suspense that focuses more on the suspense. And then I started writing for Nocturne. I also write for their line that's called Harlequin Romantic Suspense. And I've been doing the Nocturnes and romantic suspenses now for several years. After I'd been under contract and had gotten the first ones at least in their hands or out or whatever, I got notified that, gee, with these particular lines, we are increasing the page count and the spiciness. So in order to stay published by them, I had to increase the sexiness. And I don't get into it. Well, I do because I have to. I have sex scenes in there. And I think that the sex scenes work, but I'm not as comfortable writing about them as I am like the dogs and the mysteries or the werewolves. And I do have, one of the things I haven't gotten into too much in my Nocturnes is that my characters, at least one of either the hero or heroine, is a shapeshifter. Sometimes both, but usually it's one or the other. And if they're going to have sex, they're going to have it while they're in human form, because I don't want to get into it. So that happens a lot, but not with a shapeshifter.
And one of my Egyptian books is about the crocodile god, and the way I approached it was that he's a shifter. And I had somebody ask me, well, how he's a crocodile? How does that? I'm like, no. Like you said, it's when he's human that he and the lady have their encounter.
It's easier that way.
Yeah, it's
You know, nobody's ever asked me about that. This is
well, maybe because you aren't writing crocodiles.
but even nobody's asked, you know, what happens? Are they going to have sex while they're one of them's changing?
Yeah,
I don't get into it, and I just maybe because they're Harlequins or something, nobody's ever asked. I'm glad. That's not something I want to get into too much. Now, we're gonna get a little bit more into the writing process, but one of the things is obviously, for writing romance, we have a hero and a heroine. How do you choose who's going to be each of those, and what makes them tick? What gets them together? Why are they romantic together? I know it's different in each book to some extent, but when you start out looking at, okay, I'm going to write this book, how do you determine who the hero and heroine are going to be? I guess the other thing is, too, are we all writing in third person, and therefore we get both points of view? Is that,
I write
no?
third one.
Oh, okay. Why don't you explain how you do yours first?
Well, when I wrote my first book, because it was my first book, I just stayed with the protagonist's point of view. And if it were a play, you'd go, wow, that poor woman had to be in every scene.
Mm-hmm.
So as I moved forward, but I never switched to the male point of view. Because it's not important to me.
Oh dear. Later.
Take it out. My books are about a woman's journey, and I don't care what he's thinking. Clearly, we never know what men are thinking. So I don't read my books.
Okay. Well, how about the rest of you? You're writing.
I write in third, multiple point of view. So on the first one in the series, I actually know who's going to be talking. So there's a lot of people talking, but I make sure that it's the hero or the heroine, and I want to show everyone how each other feels. And I don't know, it just seems like I write best in the male's point of view. So maybe I don't know, in another life. I have no idea. But that's just how I look at it. So I have an idea of how the book will go from start to finish. It's not planned that I had book 2, 3, and 4. It just came about when the other characters actually shine. So I know, okay, book 2 is going to be about this next 2 characters. So that's how the series goes.
For me, I kind of write a lot like Lorenz. I do third person, and I usually do maybe a brief sketch of the female, the heroine, and the hero, and kind of how I see them, description-wise, blonde, brown, that sort. And usually my characters, and I do a lot where I write kind of bounce off, like I'm going to do his point of view, and then I'm going to do her point of view. So it's kind of encompassing both of them, and then. I usually like to set them up so that there's going to be some sort of, they're not just going to come together. There's going to be some sort of in the first one he's a sheik and he's got a harem, he's got a wife, and she's kidnapped a white woman and and is thrown to him and he buys her. So there's a lot of dynamics going on there. In the second book, she's married to the brother, but he's not very loving, and so she falls for the half brother. There's always something going on where they're not just going to come together. There's going to be a lot of conflict. But of course, we all want our happy ending.
So usually what happens for me is I'll have a thought about a situation, or I'll see an article, something piques my interest, and then I start going, well, what if? And so like the book that's based on Titanic in space, that was kind of the beginning of the what if. Well, what if it was not a ship in the ocean, it was a space liner in the future? Then I had to figure out, I usually write, my heroes are usually special forces, soldiers type. Even if it's in ancient Egypt, they must have had special forces. And so I had to figure out, why would one of them be traveling on a luxury space liner? And then once I had that figured out, then it was, okay, and who is he going to meet? Who's going to be his heroine? And that particular book I just wrote from the hero's point of view. But normally I write third limited, and I'll have some of the hero's point of view and then the heroines. It just depends on what the scene is, what's happening, and which person is more logical to hear the story from at that point. I do mine.
We've kind of sort of touched on this a little bit too, but how do you plot? Are you, I don't know whether all of you are aware of what the writers call pantsers. Pantsers are those who write by the seat of their pants and don't necessarily plan where they're going. And then there are those who are plotters, who figure out before they start writing, or as they first get into it, what's going to happen and basically when in the story.
I am definitely a passer. I have no discipline. I only have a character lineup. I know how they react. I know the color of their hair, what they're gonna say. Other than that, if I have the ending, I'll just get there somehow, and you'll fix it. So.
I'm a lot like Lorenz. I have a description. It seems like we're kindred spirits. I have a basic outline. I know where I want them to be, but it's actually very dangerous, because if you guys are writers out there and you know anything about writer's block, it can be very debilitating, because you're just sitting there looking at the screen saying, "Talk to me." But it's just kind of you do have some sense of where it's going, but you write, and the characters hopefully will talk to you, and you'll get where you need to go, but it can be.
If I have an outline, I'm not going to follow it.
That's true. If you have an outline, I mean, I don't even know how you would do an outline. One, they get together. I don't know, but yeah, I'm very. It's a brief outline, like a sketch. I'd say a sketch of the characters and kind of where I see it going.
Are you a pencil or plotter?
I feel like I'm from her space liner. I am a plotter to the nth degree. This woman's fault. My mother and father were, she's retired now, my mother and father were both television writers, going back to Dick Van Dyke, all the way through One Day at a Time. My father, more than my mother, very stringent. My father's attitude was, if you, by the time you finished your outline, you should only have to add dialogue. And so that's where I was coming from. My mother was much more forgiving, and hey, Joe, they're divorced. Why don't we see about maybe moving away from our outline? Well, my father would actually say, with a straight face while writing comedy, you cannot let your characters run off with you. You can't let them, you can't fall in love with the character and have them take the story somewhere else. Well, I took all this to heart, and in the middle of this, he dies. So, you know, I suddenly was thinking, I think maybe he's wrong. Because characters do come along. And I finally had, I remember hearing a New York Times bestseller say one time that her favorite review was, said, you know, thank you, Miss Miranda, for not revealing who the bad guy was till the very end. And she said, that's because Miss Miranda didn't know. And I thought, well, I can't, you know, because the way I write, I can't even imagine that. But this last book that I just wrote, I was 3/4 of the way through my concrete outline and realized my ending was wrong. Now, back in the day, I would not have changed it. Can't do it. But this time you know, you get more confidence as you write more. And so I'm trying to get a little more leeway. The last book I tried to start, I had a vague idea, and it just caused me so much anxiety. All right, we're still in baby steps of pantsing.
Well, so I'm a totally seat of the pants person. I hate that term, but I am. And I'm kind of superstitious about how the muse works, so I don't try to figure it out too much. It works for me, and you know. So when I start, I'll know the hero, the heroine, the overall situation. I usually know how it opens and how it ends, and there's a couple of scenes along the way. And then I just start to write, and it comes to me, you know. I mean, I guess my characters do tell me, they take over to some extent, but I don't. If I plot it out too much in advance, I will never write it, because in my head I've already told the story and I'm done with it and I've moved on. So I can't do outline, can't do structure. I just write. It's me.
Interesting group, because I started out very much a plotter. I did a very detailed outline, and I realized I didn't always stick to it either. But I still do a synopsis before I start. I developed what I call a plot skeleton that over the course of time I have, you know, who the characters are, how they are. I usually do my own version of like a screenplay plotting, and from that I take it and turn it into a synopsis, and that's what I write from. And I usually stick to it. But, you know, because I'm not doing the detailed outlines, there is some room for changing, and that's fine. But I wouldn't feel entirely comfortable if I weren't doing something to do the plot. But I'm curious, especially for you who are pantsers, how do you know, because in a romance, if the characters, if the hero and heroine meet at the very beginning and they're attracted and there's no conflict, then there's no story. So how do you decide what the conflict's going to be and how you weave it in and how you're going to resolve it? How do you decide that if you're a pantser?
Well, it's a part of the plan already. Let's say with the ending, I know exactly what the conflict would be. So that's actually just positioning where that conflict would happen. So I would know already approximately how long the book would be also, or short, it depends. Because if I notice with my paranormal series, it's longer. Because there's a lot of things happening, there's a lot of subplots, a lot of characters. My contemporary, short, 70,000 words, I'm done. So it's easier to plan for me because I know the conflict ahead of me. It's just when it's actually going to happen.
Tracy?
Yeah, I'm the same way where it's that brief sketch. I like with the Sheik's son. They met pretty. I mean, I'm guessing maybe 50 pages in. So there was a lot that I had to set up. You know, I had to set up what she was doing, what he was doing, how they're going to interact, and I'm doing that with my fourth book too. So it's just, I think you just have kind of a sense of where you're going, where you see yourself, and setting everything up, and then, you know, and I always have lots of conflict in my book, so it's not, they're not just going to meet and say I love you and get married, no.
Then we want to read it.
Exactly. No
They want
fun.
that real in your real life, not necessarily in your books. Now, you plot, how do you decide?
Well, I think a big difference in what I'm hearing is that I set up 4 different storylines, all of it tie in at the end. So that you've got to plot that out because you have to know where each one of these storylines is going and how they can all intertwine. The other thing that I do is that I don't let you know who the hero is. There's
really?
Oh yeah, I'm a wild woman. Yeah, there are other men. There are other men out there. Because there are other men out there.
Newsflash.
Yeah. And so
you make it a romance then?
well, that's what I'm saying. It's not these aren't a
Okay.
typical romance. You don't know. And sometimes, I mean, sometimes they're good guys. You know, some of them are bad guys, but some, and you just like, wow, that's not the one I would have picked. But it's like, you know, yeah. So it's a little different. It's a little different. The only guy that I sort of another thing that I learned from my parents, which was really interesting, is because I wrote TV, it was all about hearing. It's like I don't see my people. I only hear their voices, and I often hear a voice like somebody at work or this kind of thing. The only guy I ever saw is I was watching Brothers and Sisters. You ever watch that show? And it's just like, I gotta put Rob Lowe in this.
See him in there somewhere.
Yeah, so he was one of my guys.
So, but do you then, are you writing romance or women's fiction?
I've always thought I was to me, I've always just been writing comedy. I have been writing a funny women's journey. That's what I saw that I was writing. Because Kensington bought these, they're being, I mean, which one of these has that awful cover? Okay, this book has nothing to do with my book.
Oh.
He's not in it, she's not in it. But, okay, you know, and we just slowly, you know, by the time we got to the 3rd book, yes, there's a building on the cover. Okay? So we had met, meeting of the minds, Kensington and me. But in the next series, they just gave up and said, we're going to do women's fiction with you. So there you have it. So, and I think, because one thing I have to say, I think that that they did a disservice to their clients. Because not only is this not the book, especially the first one, not the book anybody's expecting with that cover, it then pissed people off. And I didn't even know what was wrong because people would say, I didn't even know who the hero was. It's like, well, of course you don't. I very meticulously set up 3 guys. But, so yeah, so now we're doing women's fiction, and this will remain my, I mean, I love them. I love these books. I think they're really funny. It's just sometimes if somebody is in the mood for a traditional romance,
Well, so, I mean, mine are, it's set up around the situation, and like with Mission to Majundar, my most recent science fiction, the hero is on the planet to recover bodies from a crashed spaceship that's in the mountains, and the heroine is the princess. She's blind, she's not well regarded, she's going to be shuffled off to an arranged marriage, and the two of them ordinarily would never have met, but there was an assassination attempt, and they come together. And so then the various things in the plot happen, and they're thrown together more, and they start working together as a team to accomplish some things. And that's kind of how all my books go. The people are thrown together in the situation, and they may be in, dire danger, like on the spaceship that's going to blow up. But as they work through it, as they solve the problems, they respect each other. They each have different abilities, obviously, but my heroes and heroines are both really strong people. And it just, as the events in the book go on, the respect turns to admiration, turns to love, and before the book's over, you've got your happily ever after. So that's how I do it with mine.
Very good. Now, we've all published a little differently, and I'd like to know how you made the decision to either to self-publish, traditionally publish, do both, however you decided to do it. You want to start?
Well, it was kind of funny. The first book of mine that got published, I got to live that author's dream. I had decided, okay, now's the time I'm going to try to become published and really write seriously, and this was in 2010, 2011. So Karina had a call out that they wanted ancient world romances. So I had that flash, and oh my God, the crocodile god is a shifter. So I wrote it, I submitted it to their slush pile, and then in August of 2011, they actually called me and said, we're going to buy this book, we're going to print it. So I didn't get a rejection. I was so incoherent on the phone with her that Angela James finally said, you did want us to publish this, didn't you? Yes. So I've had rejections since, we must admit to the truth here, but that was it was amazing. So the first 2 came out from Karina, which is a branch of Harlequin, and then they decided not to go on doing Ancient World. But I had a lot of Ancient World romances to tell still, so I decided to self-publish them. But in the meantime, the Titanic-based book, it was the 100th anniversary of the Titanic's sinking in 2012. And I had the book written, and we're in January of 2012. And there's no time to go through the process of submitting it. Even if Karina had bought it right that minute, they wouldn't have been able to print it and get it out the door by April of the same year. They have a schedule. They have a lot of other authors. So I kind of got thrown into self-publishing with that book just to get it out, to coincide with the anniversary. And then once you've done it once, you want to do it again. And I like the control. I like being able to have my own schedule, and so self-publishing is my thing. I wouldn't say no if Kensington wanted to ask me to write a series for them. I would do that too. But independent publishing, that's me.
I wanted a traditional publisher because I wanted somebody besides my mother to say I was a good writer. and I waited. I waited a long time. I was rejected for 2 years. And what I would do is every time a rejection would come in, one would go out. I mean, like clockwork. Most people now just want an electronic submission, but you'd still find more than a handful who wanted, to send pages, and then you had to put in a return self-addressed stamped envelope for your rejection, because they're not going to send that book back. They're just going to shred it. So what I did is I bought bright yellow envelopes. So as soon as I opened the mailbox, I knew. So I didn't have to go, today. So, and my sweet husband would come up and go, Yeah, the yellow envelope. So, but I mean, I was just determined, because in all honesty, I knew that I could write. So it wasn't that, you know? So it was like, I wanted this, and I was willing to wait for it. And if it hadn't happened, I'd still have my yellow envelopes. I'd still be doing it.
2 years, huh? That's a long time.
Wow.
Wow. I'm one of those with the traditional dozen manuscripts under the bed before I actually started selling the novel. And that was 20 years ago. But then since I did start publishing, and the thing was, in those days, I knew I wanted to have romance in my stories, but my last manuscript that got rejected, someday I'm gonna publish it myself, or do some edits and publish it. But at the time, it was a paranormal romance with sci-fi elements, and because it was time travel, because I started writing time travel romance, it was also a contemporary and a historical. And in those days, I was told, we like your writing style. It was a really nice rejections, or a lot of nice rejections. I wrote, we like your style, we kind of like your story, but we can't sell that, so go away. So the next thing that I did write was a then traditional time travel romance where my character, in the one that got rejected, the hero was a physicist who was using a system that actually today they think could actually work if there were going to be any time travel. In those days they were saying it would be black holes. And anyway, that one got rejected because of the sci-fi elements, or the number of elements. So in the one that did sell, my heroine wound up traveling in time because she touched a fossil. and that was sold, and that was my first one. But yeah, it was a very long process, and I did have some mystery short stories published before then. I won a national award for them, but I couldn't get novels published for a while. But now I do. And I had chosen traditional because when I started out, people who tried to self-publish, they were really looked down on, like, you can't really write, can you? And so now I got my backlist, I got the rights back, and one of them is up. There's an ebook right now. And I may, someday I may do some self-publishing too, but since I'm writing 4 series for more or less traditional publishers at this point, I don't have time, unfortunately. So, how about you? How did you decide?
For me, I definitely could not take any of that rejection. That would just kill me. No. And I'm on Amazon, Nook, and iTunes, and here, and then in another bookstore. So for me, it was just kind of a no-brainer. I always was going to go the Amazon route, and Amazon also has a sister company called CreateSpace, which allows you to do the physical. But yeah, for me, it was just, all the way to Amazon. You were 20, did you say? How many? No.
I think a dozen. And in those days, literally under the bed, because although I did write on a computer, you didn't set things out electronically or anything. So
Well, and I was thinking, even if you wanted to be an indie back, like, because you're at 39, so I don't even, how would you have done that back then? I mean, could you have just like printed them yourself and given them to people? I mean,
I don't think so.
Yeah,
It
so-
just wasn't done.
Yeah.
I think Amazon is really, they created the
Yeah,
channel.
yeah.
I mean, they created it.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. In fact, I did know I belong, I'll ask you all too, if you belong to any writers' organizations, but I belong to several, and I know there was one lady who she was very nice, but she decided to self-publish. And she was given such a hard time that everybody just sort of snubbed her. I don't know what she's doing now, but especially I felt bad for her then, but especially looking back, she kind of was the forerunner of today.
Well, and I think, like what you're saying about the indies, even though, there are all these platforms, there also is a lot of crap out there. So, I mean, there's a reason why they do get a bad rap. I mean, I put a lot of time, effort into the cover, I edit, but there are so many communities that you can go on, like Amazon, the KDP, where these people are just putting stuff up and they just want that quick buck. And they don't realize that for that quick buck, there's a lot of competition out there, and you really have to try and put a good product out. But I feel kind of like with the indies, there's sometimes a reason why they're looked down on, because people do want that quick buck. Yeah.
Well, it's a writer's dream to be published by a traditional publisher, so I went and submitted. Of course, I was rejected by the same people who actually republished the series. So back then, I was the first one and the second one was actually in contract, the series, with another publisher, and everything was going right. And then there was a contest with the Writers Coffee Shop. That's the publisher for 50 Shades, the first one. And they had an open call to submit erotic stories. So I came in and joined. By some power, I got second place, and they published this book. And then after I had a tussle with the first publisher, they actually took this one, which they rejected. So, go figure.
Yeah, that's the thing to me about self-publishing. I'm not going to be rejected again ever because I mean, really, I'm not going to waste all the time for the book to be in their process, for them to read it, for them to send me the nice or the yellow envelope. Whatever. No, I'm going to have it out there. It's
But I
out
am
there
going
selling.
to try the self-publishing route too.
Yeah, well, a lot of people are hybrid nowadays. You do
Mhm.
mix. It works.
One thing, especially when you said you couldn't take the rejection, because you hear that a lot. You hear that a lot from people that say, I just, I either can't bring myself to send it out because I know I'll get rejected. I feel very strongly that rejection means absolutely nothing. Rejection doesn't change your life at all. Somebody says no. Okay, no, you're still breathing, you're still you. Nothing's changed. Yes changes everything. Everything. So, I mean, to me, there's nothing at stake but your ego. And if you can get that, it's just like, yes, it pinches, it hurts, but whatever. But you're exactly in the same place. And it's just so worth, to me, it's so worth the risk. Because it doesn't matter if they say no.
And to me, it's the time. If you haven't noticed by now, every writer has a slightly different take. And for me, it's the time. If I've spent all this time waiting, I mean, you keep writing, obviously. You don't stop writing and twiddle your thumbs waiting for the envelope to come. But, I mean, I could have it out. I could have it selling. I could be promoting it. I could be working on the next book. So I just, for me, it works to do the self-publishing.
Well, and I'm also very grateful because, like we were talking about, without Amazon, without the iTunes and the Nook, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing.
Right, yeah,
And
right.
I'm making, good money with my 3 books and continuing. So even though, like you said, the rejection is just an ego thing, it also would mean that I'm not making any money.
Yeah.
So for me, I am extremely grateful to the people that enjoy my books and the platforms that are out there now. Because 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I would not be doing
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. And that's the thing, it's changed so much and it keeps changing constantly, and that's one of the things the publishers, the traditional publishers have to keep up with that, and we have to keep up with that because the whole industry changes. Blink and Amazon does something new, and then you've got to figure out, as a writer, how to work with that new platform.
And I think the writers and the self-publishers catch on faster than the publishers. The publishers are such behemoth machines.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Well, and they have a publishing schedule that goes
Yeah.
out a couple of years still,
Yes.
so they can't be too nimble.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
I was going to ask if you belong to any writing organizations, and to expand on that too, how did you learn, especially those who are self-publishing, how did you learn how you wanted to do it? I belong to a number of organizations. I belong to Romance Writers of America and 2 different local chapters. I belong to Mystery Writers of America and Sisters in Crime and their local chapter. And it's a great way of networking, and I learn a lot in different areas from them. And some of the people there are talking about how to self-publish and everything. You can get in classes on it. But do you belong to organizations, or how do you learn what you want to do?
Between writing and work for me, it really isn't any time.
So you just learn it on your own then, wow.
And of course, networking with author
Yeah.
friends. No rules.
I looked into, I always call them RAWA, the writers, the Romance Writers of America. I did look into them, and I would like to join them. I have my bachelor's degree in communications, and I actually wrote for newspapers, which was one of my jobs before I started publishing. So I do have a background in writing. but I actually would like to join because I really like the camaraderie, and even just listening to you ladies, it's nice to hear people talk about, you know, like the characters talking to them and not be thinking you're crazy or, you know, because it's writer, it's a very specialized, you know, field. So, you know, thank you, because I do think I'd like to join in the next couple months.
If you want to join this weekend, OCC is with the Orange
You're a
County-
representative?
No, it's just, I've been a member for.
No, and I agree.
The locals for a very long time, and both of the local chapters, the most local chapters, are meeting this weekend. So I'm going to go to OCC, which is Orange County chapter, and Los Angeles Romance Authors on Sunday. So if you want any more information or not, you know, if you want information, I can give you some.
So how about you? Are you in any organization?
I'm sort of in that same position of, between work and, you know, every 6 months I have a book due. It doesn't leave that much time. I was am in an enviable position is that the very first writers' conference I went to, Jody Thomas, who is New York Times best-selling romance writer, and Catherine Ryan Hyde, who wrote Pay It Forward, both came up to me and said, you write in a very different style than anything we've heard. Don't give up. Here's my card. Both of them, here's my card. And I had private lessons just about from these two complete heavyweights. And Jody had said to me one time when I finished, the first version of The Merchant of Venice Beach was a very, very different book. And it had a very different ending. And I hope someday to use it, so I won't tell you what it is. But it apparently, it had kind of an unusual twist at the very end. And I'm telling Jody this, and she is the sweetest, most polite Texas woman I've ever met. And so she's listening, and I hit her with bam with this ending, and she goes, oh, well, honey, now you're just showing off. And she said, this whole book that you have written in this tone, which is just a light comedy, she said, they don't want this. You know, they don't want it to suddenly be, you know, The Sixth Sense or something like that.
Left turn.
Yes, exactly. She goes, they don't want that. And she said, you know, you have your choice. You can put the book under your bed, and then when you've published a bunch of books, somebody will say, hey, what else have you got? And then they'll publish it. She said, or you can fix this book. I said, then I'll fix the book. And she said, well, you know, if it's the book of your heart, if you've written the book of your heart, I mean, maybe you don't want to change it. And my feeling was, I have written the book of my heart. I now want to sell it. And so that means, and again, thank God, you know, I was raised by two professional writers who food wasn't going on the table, mortgage wasn't being paid, unless they did, you know, there's an element that I luckily, because of the way I was raised in my DNA, I could accept that right away. So it wasn't like, oh my God, I put so much, because I did, I put everything into it. But it's like, okay, now I did that, now I'll fix it. So I was very lucky to have those two, and still to have those two in there. I can still call them about anything. Yeah.
Well, and I think the romance author world is very collaborative and helpful, and people they're very, as she had, you know, they'll give advice, they'll give support. Now, I belong to the Romance Writers of America. I belong to the Los Angeles chapter. I almost never get to the meetings, but the Loop is very useful where we email each other and ask questions. And I'm the treasurer of the Fantasy Futuristic, FF&P, Fantasy Futuristic and Paranormal chapter. It's an online. We just call ourselves FF&P, so I have to really stop and think. And so we don't have real meetings. We do everything online. But again, there's a lot of sharing about paranormal and futuristic. But the place where I've learned the most about being self-published is this loop that's run by the author Marie Force. She writes romantic and romantic suspense, and she's also traditionally published, but she was one of the earliest ones in our genre to just really get out there and maximize the self-publishing. And she was very encouraging to me, and I think there's 500 or 600 people on this loop now. Some really large, well-published names that are surprising sometimes when you see them now talking about self-publishing, and everybody shares, you know, they share the tricks of how to work different things in Amazon, and who's a good editor and who are good cover artists, and just a lot of advice. And I would have had a much harder time being self-published without that resource, and it's just amazing. These ladies that started it with Marie, they want to pay it forward and help others. And so that's more than anything else, that's been my resource to how to do the self-publish.
And I agree that I was stunned at how open and willing, even the biggest,
Yeah.
even the biggest people. I mean, Nora Roberts was at that original thing, and, you know, she said, you're a very good writer. It's like, and it's just because my day job is TV, and in that world, you're watching your back every second, every second. And I'm in cable, it's not even that well paid. So, but to be in this world where everybody is so forthcoming and giving of their time and their expertise, it's amazing. It's amazing.
That's one of the best things to me about being an author. I mean, when I first got signed by Karina, you get entrance to the Karina Authors Loop, which is actually where I met Marie Force. And I mean, it was just very eye-opening to me to be part of this group of authors of all different experiences and selling levels, and how helpful people were. And especially because the brand new authors were kind of annoying with the first book, and the other authors, now I know, they're very patient, they're excited for you, but they understand that the sun is not going to stop coming up in the morning because your book, oh my God, your one book is now out. And so it's just really a helpful community. It's a safe community,
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very, very supportive. And
Yeah.
just in case any of you is interested, there is a conference coming up called California Dreamin' at the end of March. And that's for all four, well, anybody can come, but the 4 Southern California chapters of RWA are presenting again at the end of March. We're getting a little bit low on time, so I'd like everybody to say what you're working on now, and then we'll open it up to questions.
I have the 4th book of the series entitled Reckoning, and it will be published June this year. And self-publishing maybe then.
I'm working on, I don't have a title, I'm just calling it Isabel. She's the daughter of the first couple from the Sheik and the Slave, and it's during the French Revolution, and so she's living her life trying to get through the revolution, and the hero is a delegate in the Estates General and goes through the whole French Revolution with Max Robespierre. He's good friends with him. He's kind of the mad Robespierre who is killed.
I'm working on the 2nd book in my women's fiction series, which is called Welcome to Fat Chance, Texas. And the storyline, very briefly, is a billionaire like Bill Gates billions, old gentleman dies, and he leaves a videotaped will that he leaves a ghost town in Texas to 8 strangers of varying ages. And what he says in the videotape, and there's a reason why he picked each one of them, and what he says, I took something from each one of you, if not from you specifically, from your father, your grandfather, depending how far we're going back. And what I'm not going to apologize for the way I made my money. I made my money because I saw something nobody else saw. And I'm not going to apologize for that, but I know I took something from you. So what I'm giving you back, I will end up giving you money, but first you have to go to this ghost town and see if you can make something of it. Because what I took from you is your chance at the American dream. So this is the 2nd book of that series.
Nice.
Well, so I alternate my science fiction and my ancient Egypt. I don't know why, that's just the pattern I fell into. So I'm currently working on Ghost of the Nile. I'm very creative with my titles. We have Priestess of the Nile, we have Dancer of the Nile, we have Ghost of the Nile. And the basic little plot is that he is a soldier, and these all happen in 1500, BCE, ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt, yeah. And so he's a soldier who was murdered, and because he was never given the proper burial rites, he can't pass into their afterlife. It's based on some of their beliefs. So one of the goddesses wants to bring him back to life in Egypt to solve a problem for her, and if he can solve the problem, then he will get passage to the afterlife, the way they understood it. So of course, he comes back, and the first thing he does is rescue, you know, a lady that needs rescuing, and so then he's trying to solve the problem for the goddess, but he's trying to solve the problem for this woman, and they fall in love, and there's all these complications, and I'm 65,000 words into it. I've probably got another 15,000 to go, and I'm hoping to get that out by the end of March, and then I'll work on another science fiction.
I just turned in the manuscript for my next nocturne, my Alpha Force Nocturnes. It's my mini-series with Harlequin, and it's about a covert military unit of shapeshifters, so that's how I've been working on shapeshifters. And right now, I just started writing number 2 in my Barkery and Biscuits mystery, yes, because I have my character has a Barkery, which is her dog Biscuits, but she also winds up solving mysteries, as always happens in cozy mysteries. Yes. Anyway, I wanted to open this up for questions, but I wanted to pass out tickets and just give me back half of them.
From going to newspapers to novels, and were there any special challenges from going from article length pieces to full-on long-form novels?
Yeah, I actually got my degree from Cal State Northridge in communications, and I worked at 2 newspapers. I worked at one in Santa Clarita, and then I worked for a Gannett paper in Celia. Probably nobody's ever heard of it, but it's, you know, up in the Central Valley. And yeah, I mean, it's completely different, because when you're working, you know, you have to, for a Gannett paper, you're having to have 2 to 3 sources for each, you know, each article, and you know, you're having to do interviews, and so it's very in-depth. So it's like apples and oranges. I mean, you're writing, you know, sex scenes, and then you're writing about, you know, the opening of a park. So yeah, so it's very different. And, you know, for me, like I said in the beginning, this was just always something I really enjoyed doing. So, you know, they're not really comparable, except that, you know, you have to have your basic grammar, your basic structure. But yeah, they were very different. But that was what I got my degree in, and I enjoyed it, but they pay very, very badly. Not, yeah, reading the letter.
This is the other
Other questions? Yes. Everybody in the past. 2-in-1 stories, Harlequin has published them, and some bookstores in the East, I've seen them. It's supposed to be easier for readers to buy them and read more than one and get to know more than one author. So I have some of those here, but I don't see them in the bookstores here or in the other stores. So anyway, so you get something somewhat unique unless you order. So right here, yes.
I have a general question. So you all sorry.
For me, it would be what your taste in sexual scenes are. The first one's very, very spicy. That's one the grandmother can't read. So if that's what you like, and then the other 2 are just kind of a standalone historical romance, like any kind of, you know, with the sex scene, you know, flowing into the scenes and something like that.
If you want paranormal, of course, start with Haunted. It's an ongoing story. If you want a little hot, but it's really playful, you'll go with Featherlight, which is my erotic romance. Or if you just want straight up contemporary, go with Pieces of Broken Time. It's a military romance set in Lancaster. Tumbleweeds and all.
Thank you. My question is about series. A lot of your books stand alone, but they're also, you each have several series. So how does that work? Do you figure this is going to be a 3-series book, or this story, I'm writing one, and at the end of it you go, oh my gosh, I got so much more to tell, or you get feedback from your fans who read it that say, hey, wonder what happened to this one, or wonder what happened to this character, and then that gets you excited about developing another story. How does the series piece work?
Well, for me, it depends on the story, but with the mysteries, cozy mysteries, they always buy them, the first ones in a group of 3, because they assume it's going to, that people are going to read 3, or that'll really get the series going. With the Harlequins, though, you can do a mini-series for Harlequin, and with this particular one, with my Alpha Force, I had done an Alpha Force story for Harlequin. I also did one about a woman with limited Valkyrie powers. She could bring people back to life, and I kind of saw that as being a series.
they decided that they liked Alpha Force better. In fact, I had to call it Omega Force initially. They said it's Alpha Force because of the alpha wolves and everything. It's Alpha Force, and make it into a series. Okay? And I'm also, with the romantic suspense, I have one now where I've turning it somewhat into a mini-series too, where it's not a non-witness protection program. In other words, it's about people who are in terrible situations, but they don't have evidence that they can actually become witnesses in a trial and therefore get witness protection. So I've started my own little part of the U.S. Marshal Service that will help them.
Well, I was gonna answer the serious things, because since I'm a pantster, that's really a challenge to me, you know, because I write the book. And then, well, like you said, sometimes I get readers asking me, well, when are you gonna write the sequel for character X, you know, and so then I said, oh, okay, I guess I have a 2-book series going now. But one of my goals for this coming year, since I'm gonna be writing full-time, I would really like to do a 3-book series and know from the beginning that it was a 3-book series and do my version of outlining and plotting, you know, not a whole lot. Because I'd like to have a regular 3-book series and then build on that.
My mentor, Jody Thomas, told me that I pretty much, if I wanted to go the traditional route, starting from scratch, I had to have a series or somebody with the chops of Kensington or, you know, the big houses really look at it.
Yeah.
So I had to have 2 books and an outline for the 3rd. And that's what I did.
And that's because you are very organized. I can't do it.
Yeah, I don't have, mine are all standalone, but when I was coming out with my second one, The Sheik and the Slave is the #1 selling, was very popular. And on my Facebook, I had a lot of fans that kept saying, we want to hear what happened to the son. So I was like, great, I've got my 3rd book. So actually they were the ones that kind of prompted me to write the 3rd one, which is about the son of the couple from the 1st book, but they're all standalone, so I don't really write series.
Well, Hunted was primarily supposed to be, actually, really, just 1 book. Into the 3rd chapter, his association with the other characters just brought on book 3. Well, into the 15th chapter, there goes book 3 and 4. So that's just, I kept controlling. But right now we're at 5, and that's going to be it.
Yeah, that's what you say now.
I mean, vampires, you know, they have, they're deceased. So
Oh, okay.
how much can you write about that?
On the other hand,
Yeah.
any other questions? Yes.
Do the current political or social issues ever creep into your books, or do you try to avoid them like the plague?
I'm historical, so mine are 17th, 18th
Use
century.
historical methods to talk about current issues. Okay, but the answer is no, I guess. Is that?
Well, in my second science fiction book, which is Escape from Zulair, I used some aspects of things that had happened in India in the 1800s. Not that the plot was based on that, but it was inspired by that. And then there's also a scene in Zulair where a religious figure is confronted by a mob that's intent on killing him, and he actually talks them out of it. My guys don't have to go in and rescue him because he talks them out of it, and that was based on an incident that happened in Africa back in the 80s. So sometimes I'll pick, for the science fiction, sometimes I'll pick, you know, things just, oh, you know, that's an interesting thing, and that I weave it into the plot, but not the whole book wouldn't be based on, you know, political. Because it has to have a happily ever after at the end.
I picked what I thought was a ludicrous local story in Santa Monica at the farmer's market. I don't know if you've ever been to the Sunday farmer's market. Got those cute little ponies that go around, you know? And so I had one of my characters at war with the people who had the pony rides. Luckily, before I turned the book in, there was all this litigation because there were all these pro-pony people who said that, you know, it was cruel to the ponies, and they won. So the ponies are gone, and I had this whole like kind of funny arch thing about these ponies that are now not there anymore because of this hideous local battle. So I had to change it to a yoga stand.
That's fun.
I consider my stories mostly escaped, so I don't necessarily do that, but I have written a pet rescue mystery series, and I did get into various aspects of pet rescues, like puppy mills and things like that, and of course, in my stories, things get resolved, and of course, none of the animals were harmed and all that, but it was interesting writing about it, and I got some very interesting comments from people as well.
We've got you over here, and we have.
Anybody else? Yes.
Do you guys write for male, female, or are you just telling the story, or are you going for a certain, genre?
I'm assuming that my characters are, my youngest character is 32, and my oldest character is 70. So I'm assuming it's a mature, smart woman who's reading my books, and a lot of gay men. God love them. A lot of gay men love my books.
And I have a lot of male readers, especially the science fiction. They comment to me on Twitter, they comment on my Facebook, they review it, and so I don't consciously write it for anybody except people who like science fiction with romance woven into it. And when I'm writing the male characters, I try to make them, because they're usually in special forces of the future or the ancient Egyptian, I try to make them as much like a special forces soldier of today, so that if one of my characters was to wander into the bar where the Navy SEALs are, they would be accepted. So I really have to put myself into that mindset when I'm writing the male characters. And then the women, well, that's easier, 'cause I'm women, so yeah. Yeah.
The two genres that I write in are pretty much women audience, and which is fine.
We have a question over
Oh,
here.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say, this will have to probably be the last question, because we want everybody to have the opportunity to buy some books and get them signed, and we close at 9. So.
It's for Lorenz. So what inspired you to try self-publishing when you've already been traditionally published?
Most of my friends are self-published, and they always tell me that I'm the odd one out. They have more control over their covers, although I do have control over my covers. They control the prices, of course, of the books, when the sale would be, and basically it's more on the financial side. And
You're in control of your plot too. Because at least at Karina, if I sold them a book, and if they didn't like the plot or they suddenly wanted a twist in the plot, but hey, if I'm publishing it myself, I can do the plot any way I want. It's like you guys have said, you can have all kind of different elements in there that the publishers are going, what is this? You can't mix that with that. So that's a part of the
I don't
control.
have that experience though with mine. It's like they let me run away with it.
That's good.
Except certain things I can't say, so that's bleak.
Okay, well, thank you all. What I would like, would you pick 3 tickets for me, please?
Give us ours.
Oh.
I have one. No, it's
Oh, okay.
go.
3,
With a
please.
smile and a flash.
Okay, may I have them? I'm going to read the numbers. Okay, the first one is 054168.
Congratulations.
Oh, there, okay,
You'll
good.
share, right?
Get one of the baskets there. Next one is. And you can tell that I love dogs by my writing. The candy in there has a dog. Well, the candy itself doesn't have a dog, but it's a picture in the heart. Yes, 054189.
Oh.
Okay, thank you. And the last one is
Yeah.
054177.
Uh-oh, that's
I don't know, one year per household.
Lucky family.
Should have grabbed the lottery ticket.
Should we pick another one, or are you okay?
Thank you all very much. If you're interested in buying books, all of these titles are up at the front cash register, so you can go buy them up there first and come on back and have the offer signed. Thank you. What is this?
Oh, so it'd be the chic side, okay. I did like this, I remember your name. You're an Italian, right? Like me, or? Okay, well, we're still both
It's my best friend's been called. She moved
So,
subgenre of
yeah, so let me give you, okay. Yes, so my guy gives us the format, but I'll put my and
Right after the season,
oh, nice.
And I have and I'm sure she's
See what I can do. That's his real name and that's the pen name, and then I put my website. But yeah, so maybe we can just email and talk about it. So that's my guy, that's my ex-husband.
Oh, okay.
He actually is a photographer.